Hey guys, welcome back to Jess Reads Romance. I'm Jessin, and today I'm going to be discussing all the books that I read in like the first half of March. Now, I did do quite a bit of rereading this month. Some of it was for the podcast, some of it was just because I wanted to reread some books that I hadn't read in a long time. And two of the books I haven't read in a couple years, and there's like a next gen spinoff coming. So anyway, I just want to reread that. But I'm gonna quickly go through the books that I've reread and already talked about on my channel because I don't want to like spend too much time on it. I do have some new books that I read recently that I have pretty strong opinions about. I did read The Savage last night. I was kind of waiting until I read The Savage to be able to film this so that I could fit it on here. And oh boy, do I have a lot to say. Anyway, before we get into that, like I said, let's talk about the books that I reread. First up is Sink or Swim. This is the second book in the Relic series by Maz Maddox, and it is a dinosaur shifter romance series. I absolutely love this. The humor is fantastic. I already talked about it, but we reread it for the podcast, and Maz Maddox sent me these little stickers of her characters, and they're so freaking cute, guys. I think that these are so adorable. So the first couple is Simon and Dalton, and they're from Smash and Grab. So let's see. Look how freaking adorable. Dalton with his pink mohawk and then Simon with his cute little blushes. They're freaking cute. I love them. So that's from the first book, Smash and Grab. Then we have Jackson and Baja, and that's from Sink or Swim. You can see how grumpy Baja looks. So he's our grump and this is our sunshine. Jackson is a cowboy and I really love it. I love that Baja is absolutely so scowly in this. And then lastly, we have Royal and Blaze. They're just freaking adorable. Look how cute they are. I love it. And that's from King and Queen. And this is the little Relic logo. I never thought that I would be as obsessed with like dinosaur shifter romances, but yeah, they're some of my favorite shifter romances that I've read. The humor is really great and the emotions are really great. I love the characters together so much. So that was a 5-star read for me. Reread. Another reread was A Scoundrel of Her Own by Stacy Reid, and this particular story was so beautiful. It tugged on my heartstrings. It's kind of like a second chance childhood crush romance. Neil and Ophelia meet because Ophelia's carriage overturned in the water with her governess, and Neil, who's only 12 years old, jumped in to save her. They were kind of lost in the woods for a couple days and they stayed at a gameskeeper cottage. They became fast friends, but the problem is they're from completely different worlds. Ophelia is the daughter of an earl, the granddaughter of a marquess, and Neil is just the son of a carpenter. So their friendship's really not possible, even though they promise to marry each other whenever they're older. So a couple years pass. Ophelia finds out something. Her father makes a deathbed confession and then recovers from his illness, very much regretting that he told his daughter this. She goes to like the seedier side of town to seek some answers, and that's when they run into each other again, and it is beautiful. Absolutely beautiful 5-star romance. Then I had to reread Savage Hearts. This is actually only my second read of Savage Hearts. I have reread Ruthless Creatures and especially Carnal Urges. Carnal Urges I've read so many times, and so I really needed to revisit Mal and Riley. Again, the humor in this book is just, it puts me over the top when I'm reading about these characters. It's a mafia romance. There's some high stakes. Riley kind of gets embroiled in it when she's visiting her sister, who is going to get married sometime soon. She hasn't talked to her sister in a couple of years. And the person sent out to assassinate her sister's fiance looks at Riley, thinks that she's a homeless prostitute, and has this hero complex about saving her from the wicked Declan and Sloane. And it's just the funniest situation. I really love it. And it turns into this kind of like secret romance slash captor captive, not really willing captive. So can we call it a captor captive romance? I don't think so. But I really love this and I gave this 5 stars, and I just really love the series so much. And most recently I reread Slightly Scandalous. This is the third book in Mary Balog's Bedwyn series, and it's about Freya and Joshua. Freya is such a strong, headstrong, independent female character. She's 25. She's a little bit on the shelf, but she's so used to doing everything by herself, and she's also grown up with a lot of brothers, and so she's very outdoorsy. And every time she's confronted with something that she's afraid of, she rather face it head on and test herself and overcome that fear rather than running away from it. So she'll pretend like she's not afraid of something and do it, even though like it may be one of her worst fears, say heights. Climb a freaking cliff instead of admitting that she's afraid of heights. So she's quite a stubborn heroine. I really loved her. She's super prickly. And her hero, Joshua, On the outside, he seems like this devil-may-care. He doesn't take life seriously. He's all in it for the laughs, but they perfectly complement each other, and it turns into like this fake fiance situation because his aunt is trying to marry him off to his cousin. He really doesn't want to, and Freya does not like his aunt at all. She has snubbed her, so she's like, I will go along with this plan. But then they kind of get caught by her older brother, the Duke. So yeah, I really love this reread. Again, 5-star romance. Loved it. I also reread Western Ways by Brittany C. Cherry. This is a modern day marriage of convenience. It has a lot to do with this will, and in order to inherit some money, these two characters have to get married. But the tension lies in that the hero grew up in foster care and he just found out who his father was. The father died, and then when he goes to his funeral, there's this girl, the girl that his father, his birth father, had pretty much adopted and raised, and he's a little bit jealous that she got all that attention and the upbringing that he wanted to have. Like, he always longed to just have a family and belong and be accepted, but instead he was bounced from foster home to foster home to foster home. Their romance is really, really, really gorgeous. He's super grumpy, she's super sunshiny, but he has such a marshmallowy center, and I just melt for him. Absolutely love this couple. I love this book. 4.5 stars for that one. Okay, so now for the books that are either new to my channel and they were rereads or their first time reads. And I don't know where to start. I don't know if I should start with The Savage because it's not good, guys. My reaction to The Savage is not what I wanted it to be, and I really don't want to have to say negative things about an author that I absolutely love and adore. I mean, I love Sophie Lark. I have her books. I love so many of her couples. She has made such an impression on me since the first time that I picked up one of her books. And I just hate that I don't love The Savage. So I guess I'm going to talk about The Savage and just get it out the way. It actually just got delivered. And God, and this cover's so beautiful too. I'm so upset that I don't like it. This was one of my anticipated reads for 2022. And I was so excited to get my hands on this. I actually had to wait like a day because it came out on one of my busy school days. And I also had to go to clinicals, but like the second I was done with clinicals, I came home and I picked up this book from KU and I started reading. At the end of The Spy, which is the last book in the Kingmaker series, we kind of had like some extended epilogues for a lot of our characters from the previous characters in the Kingmaker series, but also for Sabrina and Adric. Adric? I'm not quite sure how you say his name. We'll do Adric. But anyway, Sabrina and Adric meet at the end of the events of The Spy, and then we see them a couple years down the line and they're actually together and they're a couple. And lots of fans were clamoring for their story. They wanted to see these two characters because Sabrina has such a huge personality. She played a pretty big role in The Spy, and everyone was wondering, like, what is romance like between these two? How does Adric tame Sabrina, because she's quite a force of nature? So I was one of the ones who was very much looking forward to this book, and be careful what you wish for because I was quite disappointed in a lot of things. The book starts off with Sabrina getting off the boat from Kingmakers. So it's her summer vacation, and Adric said that he would meet her at the docks in Dubrovnik and they would go out on a date or whatever. She tried not to be disappointed because he's not there and she's just gonna go on with her life, get on the flight back home to Chicago. It's no sweat off her back. But then he does show up on a Ducati, and Sabrina's father, Nero, is big into cars, and so is her mother, Camille. So she's very interested in cars and motorcycles and also doing some dangerous things. So she's quite impressed by Ducati, but she doesn't want to actually ride on the back of his motorcycle. So she hotwires her own and they go race around the city, and they finally get to the restaurant where he makes reservations. So this is like our first date scenario between Adric and Sabrina. And Sabrina is kind of like throwing out these little tests towards Adric, seeing how he will react, because she is a wild, untamable force, and she wants to see, do you know what you're getting into? Do you know what you're asking when you want to date me? Because I'm not like any other girl that you've ever had before. Now, I will say, there are some things about Sabrina's personality that I don't love. I don't mind that she is a strong heroine with strong opinions and she wants to be really independent. That was actually something I was looking forward to. My expectations of the book would be that Adric would actually have a hard time convincing Sabrina to even give him a chance. So when I picked up this book, and they're going kind of party around Dubrovnik. 20% into the book, we get their first sex scene, and I was just kind of like, well, that happened really fast, and also I have lots to say about that. So most of the thoughts that I'm going to go over about the book, they're pretty heavy in spoiler territory. So if you've not read The Savage, then don't watch this next part, because I'm just going to talk about everything that did not work for me, sadly. And my final rating for this book was a 2-star. Guys, I was really upset by the end of this book, and there was no way that I could give it higher than a 2-star, because halfway through the book it was sitting at a 3-star, and then more things happened that really ticked me off, and it just couldn't. It had to drop to a 2-star. And I hate giving such a low rating to a beloved author, but also I'm gonna be pretty honest in my feelings about it. Okay, this book is really heavy. I'm putting it down. So what I didn't love about Sabrina's character from the beginning was that, yes, she's independent. Yes, she's fierce. She's a little bit wild, a little bit untamable. And it's not that I particularly mind that, but the way that her character is presented, I would categorize her as a contrary heroine. Now, I've talked about contrary heroines on my channel before, and I don't really ever get on board with a contrary heroine, because it's like the motivations for what she does pisses me off. For me, a contrary heroine is somebody who is defiant for the sake of being defiant. So if some character expects her to do something, she is aware of what they expect her to do, and her decision is based on the fact that she doesn't want to be predictable, and she wants to do the opposite of what people expect her to do. And I don't think that that's a great basis for decision making. And I don't like when characters make decisions based on that feeling of, oh, you think you know me, but watch while I do this, because I bet you didn't expect that. Like, that does not work for me. I hate that kind of motivation in decision making, and it just doesn't work for me. And I was already aggravated with Sabrina and some of the choices that she was making. So Sabrina is pushing Adric, seeing how much she can get away with, seeing if it would aggravate him, intimidate him, because he is very dominant. He's a dominant personality, and she didn't want to act like something that she wasn't. She wasn't going to be meek. She wasn't going to follow his directions or anything. But they end up at this club, and they take home this girl together. So Sabrina is bisexual. In The Spy, she actually had a girlfriend, and they broke up right before they got off the ship. Sabrina isn't really like a super great relationship person anyway, but when she and Adric take home this girl, I forget if she was a stripper or not, because I was just kind of like, is this really going to be our first sex scene between my hero and my heroine? It's going to be with some random person that they just picked up. Like, I just didn't care about it at all. I skimmed everything about that scene. I was a little bit upset because we already know that Adric and Sabrina end up together. So I am expecting that they are a couple. Like, the epilogue is that they get married in The Spy. So I knew that they were getting married, and to see that their first sex scene together was with somebody completely random, it just aggravated me, because there was no emotions in the sex scene. It was all about pleasure and heat and spiciness, and I just don't like sex scenes for the sake of like hotness and almost like shock value. I don't like it. It's never gonna work for me. And it's so early on in their relationship. There's no emotions. There's no emotions between these two characters besides lust. So I did not care about this sex scene, and I was 20% in to the book already feeling apathetic about their relationship. I didn't understand where we were going with their relationship. They kind of texted all throughout the summer after that one night in Dubrovnik, and then Adric goes visit his uncle Ivan, who is living in the States now, and Sabrina also goes visit. So they're kind of sneaking around behind everyone's back and just kind of like fucking like bunnies. And so it just, no emotion. They're just like banging the shit out of each other. Adric offers her the chance to come to Moscow with him because he wants to build something in Moscow. His family have always like controlled like St. Petersburg, but he is dreaming bigger, and he wants to one day control all of Moscow, because no one person has ever controlled all of Moscow before. So he has big dreams, big ambitions, and he says, Sabrina, I want you as part of my wolf pack, which is a group of people that he kind of started gathering while he was in Kingmakers. He started making alliances, and he wants Sabrina to be part of that. She doesn't want to be a subordinate, and he assures her that he wants her as a partner. He thinks that she's really smart, and he wants to build something with her. So she does. She ends up by going to Moscow and meeting the team. and it's all boys. So she has to make friends with all these people, make nice, show that she's not intimidated by them. And honestly, I wish we saw more of the wolf pack. One of the only times that I got emotional in this book, was when Sabrina couldn't sleep and she went downstairs, and there was this one guy, Vlad, who is this huge mountain of a man, like so burly, and she hears this music coming out of his room, and she peeks through, and he is playing a ukulele, and he's playing La Vie en Rose, and I'm just like, oh my god. And like the story that he tells about why he wanted to play the ukulele, he had vacationed in Hawaii and saw these big men playing this ukulele, and he's like, I can do that. And like that was the only time throughout The Savage that I actually felt emotion, and that is terrible because I'm supposed to be feeling emotion towards Adric and Sabrina as a couple, because this is supposed to be a romance. But when I tell you that I felt nothing for their relationship the whole way through besides anger towards the end, because I was apathetic to them as a couple. I didn't feel the emotions. I didn't feel like they were getting to know each other. Their relationship felt volatile. And when we get to Moscow, it doesn't get better because Sabrina suddenly comes up with the idea that she's going to make special party drugs so that they can make their mark in Moscow, take a bigger piece of the pie, and cut out some middlemen when they're selling drugs and stuff. And look, I love Mafia romance. I don't like drug use, and I especially don't like when my characters are using drugs. Unless it's part of an addiction storyline where my character is struggling and that's part of their character arc is to overcome the addiction. I don't like when my characters do drugs. I just don't. I think it's gross. And I'm sorry if you don't think it's gross, but I do, and I just cannot enjoy it when my characters are high and fucking all the time. That's almost all of their sex scenes, they are high. And I'm just like, this is so disappointing. I hate this for them. I hate this for them so much. Not to mention the fact that Sabrina is just like, yes, a mad scientist, and I can like take 25% of some LSD and 25% of some Molly and like, let's put it all together. And I'm just like, what? Since when are you good at this? It just felt like an ability that shouldn't have been in Sabrina's wheelhouse, even though she had Hakeem, which is a member of the wolf pack. His family were pharmacists, and that was like the explanation, but it just felt too easy. Like she had no trouble coming up with this new drug, and she's just like a kid, okay? And I guess that contributes to my overall feeling of just like, I can't believe the events that happen in this book, because Sabrina and Adric both feel like kids who are playing mafia boss, and they're really not on that level. And everything that they do makes me believe that they're not cut out to be the leaders at all. They are too selfish and fly off the handle when they don't get their way. And I don't think that's a good quality in a leader. And I think that Sophie Lark wanted to do like kind of like an Ivan and Sloane 2.0, because Ivan and Sloane are both dominant personalities. They're both leaders, and they come together in this partnership. But the thing is, they complement each other. Adric and Sabrina do not bring out anything good in each other. They bring out the worst in each other, in my opinion. I think that they bring out terrible things in each other. They don't balance each other out at all. They don't trust each other, and they absolutely don't respect each other. There is a line later on in the book after Adric does something so gross and heinous that I started immediately disliking him, thinking that he couldn't be redeemed by the end of the book. Spoiler alert, I don't think he is redeemed by the end of the book. But he does something. He rips Sabrina's dress, and she's annoyed because they're about to go to a wedding. She wanted to wear this beautiful dress, and he just rips it off, and he's just like, well, our relationship has always kind of been built on sex. And I'm like, yeah, you think that's a good foundation to build a relationship on? No, it's not. And he says something to the effect of, I don't just think you're beautiful, I also respect you. And Sabrina's kind of just like, we'll see. And I'm just like, you don't respect her. Because one of the most kind of like horrifying scenes in the book is when Sabrina is challenging him, because she's been telling him, hey, we need to have some cash reserves. If anything happens, we need money to fall back on. And he wants to invest everything that they make back into making more and more drugs to have more and more supply. When she challenges him, he decides to humiliate her in front of one of his wolf pack, Jasper, who we also see from the previous books in the Kingmaker series, by like fondling her, exposing her in front of him. And then they go on to have sex after this. And I'm just like, so mind blown. It is an absolutely toxic relationship. And I hated it. I was waiting for their parents. I was waiting for Dom and Ivan to come kick Adric's ass for fucking up so bad in Moscow and like bringing down the Petrov name, honestly. I felt like Adric needed his ass beat, and Sabrina, when her dad comes to clean up her mess, I'm just like, are you serious? And she's still just like, no, I'm staying here. I'm beaten from head to toe, but I have to finish this because I don't want to be a quitter and I don't want to fail. And I'm just like, but you need help. And sometimes you have to ask for help whenever you can't accomplish things on your own. But she'd rather be stubborn and rather be defiant than be vulnerable. And I don't think by the end of the book, whenever she finally kind of like has her whole like, I'm sorry, I shouldn't have done that. It was just kind of like, I didn't feel like it was enough character growth for her. And then Adric, I just don't think I could ever forgive him for the way that he treated Sabrina. He misled her on purpose. He admitted it to her. I was never going to look for a partner. I would say anything to get you over here. And he regretted saying that after, but I'm like, but you meant that. So how can I love this couple? How can I love them? I think that the ending of this book, where they kind of like get themselves out of this sticky situation, was so unbelievable. It would have been more realistic if they would have died together in that scenario. I feel like they are more Bonnie and Clyde than anything. They were just like going out in a blaze of smoke and guns because these characters don't have each other's backs and they do some stupid ass shit without having the resources, the backup, nothing. They just go balls to the walls without thinking about the consequences. And just like lots of things just didn't make sense. Just didn't make sense that they would be able to accomplish the things that they did with the minimal manpower that they had. They only had the wolf pack. They never tried to recruit anybody else to their cause. And this is a person that says Adric wants to control Moscow one day. And I'm just like, you're never gonna do that, babe. Like Ivan could have. You wish you were in Ivan's league. And there was kind of like this mentor-mentee relationship between Sloane and Sabrina. And I just didn't get it because I'm like, Sabrina's not the next Sloane either. She can never be Sloane. She is way too selfish and way too impulsive. And I just hated it. Okay, so I'm very upset by this. I was actually on the verge of like crying because I just couldn't understand why this book felt nothing like the other books that I've read by Sophie Lark. Is it because the scenes are written to be more like wow factor? I have no idea. This was always the vision for Sabrina and Adric. Either way, if I'm going into a scenario where I expect one thing and I get something else, that could be like really like, oh yeah, that's like pretty and flashy. Okay, if I'm going to a concert and all the speakers don't work or whatever, but like their fireworks are amazing and it's like, wow, that's a great fireworks show, but I came here for the music. It's like, I don't care that that was super flashy and bombastic. Like that wasn't what I came here for. I didn't come here for the crazy scenes where it was threesomes and stuff and getting high off of these party drugs and doing all that, like making sex tapes. Like I don't care about any of that if I don't feel like the characters don't care about each other. They don't have any emotions, no emotional connections, no foundation for a real lasting relationship that makes me feel like this couple is ride or die. Oh, and another thing, when Sabrina has enough of Adric's bullshit, she leaves, and that night she hooks up with her ex-girlfriend, and I'm just like, I'm not into this. I don't like when my characters sleep with other people outside of their relationship. I like reading reverse harems and books with threesomes in it, and I mean like a polyamorous relationship. I don't like when my characters are just kind of like, hey, we're together, but like sometimes I want to fuck other people, and that just never works for me either. Okay, so I am going to cut it off right there because obviously I had some big major issues with everything about the book, but I don't want to continue nitpicking it because I know that a lot of people really liked it, and if you liked it and you were impressed by all of the crazy things that went on in it, I'm glad because I paid for it and I don't love it, and it makes me incredibly sad and depressed. And I hope that we can put this family, this group behind us because I really love all of the characters in Kingmakers, and it just kind of puts a bad taste in my mouth about the series now, or at least the scenes that would feature these characters. It puts a bad taste in my mouth about these characters in particular. Okay, let's move on to other books that I've read. I did read House of Sky and Breath. This was actually one of the first books that I read in March. This book is so big. I listened a little bit to the audio, but mostly I physically read it. And this is such a complex world, it's hard to break it down, so I guess I'll just give my general feelings about everything that happened in this book. I will say that I had such blue balls when it came to this couple because in book one, we get no sex. In this book, they make like a pact to wait it out. And on the one hand, I kind of understand SJM's motivation because our heroine Bryce in the previous book was very much into casual, meaningless sex. But now that she's in this relationship that she's in love with this person, or they're falling in love with each other, she wants to do it right, and I understand that to an extent. But when you have an entire first book with no sex, lots of almost scenes, and then you get this one where it takes so long for them to have sex, and they like want to, but they made this weird pact, it just was a little bit annoying, and I think that it didn't need to be in there. We already felt the intense emotion. We already saw them basically sacrifice themselves for each other at the end of book 2. I think we see that you're committed, Bryce. You don't need to prove us by being celibate for 4 months or whatever. It was just meh, no. But holy hell, I enjoyed this book a lot. And I'm not one to love a lot of multiple points of views, but I kind of expected in a fantasy book, and I really enjoyed all the points of views that we were able to see. And everything that was happening at the end, like the third act conflict. Third act conflicts are something that can definitely sink a book a star for me. I always am wary when I get towards the end of the book knowing that something is happening because lots of authors just can't stick the landing, and sometimes that makes the book just a little bit less enjoyable for me. But SJM, in the majority of the books that she has written, she has impressed me with what she's done with the third act conflict. And I was just kind of like, I can't believe we have to wait for the next book to find out what the hell is happening. There's so many connections that are being made between series. The worlds are connecting. And I'm so happy that Jen decided to do this SJM read-along. It's starting in April, and we're going to read every book by SJM. I have yet to read the Throne of Glass series, so it will be my first time, and I'm very, very, very excited about it. But I'm going to be looking for clues, and I know that people have already made YouTube videos like breaking it down, but again, I need to read Throne of Glass so that I can see like what breadcrumbs were laid in this book connecting to that world. But anyway, I just was very impressed with this book. I ended up by giving it 5 stars. I really liked it. But God, it's long. It's very long. Then I picked up Only One Mistake by Natasha Madison. I've read a couple of hers before. She likes to write hockey romance, and I don't know why. Sometimes I want like a surprise baby or a surprise pregnancy or whatever, and I knew that this was the trope for this book. But it ended up by not working for me, mostly to do with why the characters were in the situation where the father did not know that his one-night stand was pregnant, okay? So these two characters end up by meeting, and I really kind of like the beginning of this book. Jillian is going on this blind date, and she gets to the bar. She's looking for a single guy sitting at a table alone. So she approaches this table and asks, are you whoever her date's name's supposed to be? And he's like, no, my name's Michael. I'm not that person. She's like, oh wow, I'm so super embarrassed. I'm just gonna go to the bar and wait for my date. Well, he's watching her. Nobody ever shows. And she's about to leave, and he decides to invite her to his table. So they end up by having dinner, having a great conversation, and sparks are flying. So they go back to her apartment and have a little one-night stand. Now he does lie about his career because he's a professional hockey player. He's just been transferred to Dallas, Texas, I want to say. His family is also famous, so he says that he is a personal trainer, I want to say. He doesn't want like crazy fangirls coming after him. And the next morning, they feel like this can actually be something more than a one-night stand. They exchange numbers, and he's like, I'll be waiting for your call. It's your move. You have the next move. Just let me know what you want when you want to hang out again. I'm very excited about it. Like, the conversation that they had was like, both of them were so excited to meet up again. Then all of a sudden, we have like 5 months later. Apparently, she called him, and we don't find this out until like a little bit further into the book, which is why I was just so confused. Like, what happened? They're supposed to call each other. They were supposed to hang out again, and then they just never did. The hero, Michael, goes to pick up his niece and nephew, and lo and behold, their teacher at school is his one-night stand, and she has a big pregnant belly, and he's just like, what the hell? And she's like, get out. I don't want to see you. Like, I don't want to talk to you. Absolutely no. And he's just like, what's going on? What, is that my baby? Like, why did you never tell me you were pregnant? And she's just so pissed at him. The scenario was, she ended up by calling him, but a girl answered his phone. Classic. But what happened was, he was traveling to an away game, and he left his cell phone on the airplane, and a flight attendant held his phone hostage, and he had to change his number, so he lost all the numbers. And that was the reason why that they never got back together. And Once she finds that out, now she's like, okay, you can be involved. But then I feel like the whole book turned into callbacks from other books that Natasha Madison has written and I have not read. So I feel like his entire family, his parents, his uncle, whatever, they have had books. And so the majority of the book is her meeting his family and them telling him, why are you guys not together? You probably need to move in with her. You need to marry her. Like basically pressuring him to make these steps, and they have just reconnected. So I didn't love it because it was just like, they didn't spend any time together. I wanted to see them reconnect, them bond, but it was more about his family than anything. So I didn't like it at all. I felt like it was really messy and also just kind of like very disjointed the way that the scenes played out. So I ended up by giving this book a 2-star. Then I reread Bully by Penelope Douglas, and I have never actually talked about this on my YouTube channel, so I am going to talk about my feelings on Bully even though it was a reread. I read Bully 3 or 4 years ago. It was actually my first Penelope Douglas that I have ever read, and it is high school, enemies, neighborhood rivals, and obviously the hero is bullying the heroine. Jared and Tate used to be friends, but then one summer, Jared comes back and has changed and all of a sudden is very mean to Tate. So now they're going into their senior year of high school. Tate has been away studying abroad for the last year, and she's determined that this time, Jared and all of his cronies are not going to make her life miserable. She's going to stand up to him. And we get down to the meat of why Jared had changed. Why all of a sudden did he hate Tate? And I will say that this series has lots of like One Tree Hill vibes in the sense that there's no parental figures around. These kids are basically raising themselves and living alone at home, basically can do whatever they want. Her dad's in the military and he's overseas. Her grandmother lives about an hour away, and his mom is never really there either, so they have the run of both of their houses, and it's just kind of really funny. But I honestly will say that I actually enjoyed my reread of Bully. It still held up years later. I was like, yeah, this was an enjoyable bully romance, enjoyable enemies to lover. I really felt that these characters were going through a lot. I especially loved the scene where Tate almost has her like 10 things I hate about you scene, where she gets up in front of the class and reads her like poem that is basically directed at Jared, and he realizes how much he has been hurting her. He was lashing out because of something that was happening in his life, but he also was just kind of like, wow, I really fucked that up because I've only ever cared about her, but I was behaving selfishly, and now I kind of want to change my approach. So yeah, I ended up by really loving my reread of Bully. Oh, and the reason why I wanted to reread this series is because Penelope Douglas is supposed to be releasing the Next Gen series starting with Falls Boys. So it's going to be all these characters' kids. And I felt like I need a refresher. I was like, I don't really remember their stories that well. I need to reread it. And I've read Bully and then Rival. So the next book, Rival, is about Jared's best friend. And Maddox was quite a bit of an asshole, especially at the beginning of Bully. He's just somebody that you really want to like nut punch in the beginning of Bully, and I did not like him at all. And I was like, oh no, he's getting a book. Well, his book is a little bit taboo because he had a thing with his stepsister and she was sent away, but now she's back. So yeah, there was some sort of miscommunication with why she was sent away. They both were kind of lied to by their parents after getting caught when they were like 16 with each other. So now they're seniors, they're graduating, they're going to college, and they have a chance to talk to each other again. Again, it's a little bit of a bully-ish scenario in here, but it's more about the tabooness of the step-sibling relationship and also just the volatile emotions that they're feeling because their parents are really not the greatest. I did enjoy this one, not quite as much as Bully, so I gave this one 4 stars, and I think that that was my same rating that I had originally given it anyway. Next, I read Rewriting the Stars by Claire Kingsley. This is the last book in her Bailey Brothers series, and while she was writing this book, her husband suddenly and tragically passed away, and they were high school sweethearts. And the fact that she even got this book out is amazing because it really hasn't been that long since her husband has passed. And she has this note to the reader at the end of her book, which is like completely worthwhile to read. I very much encourage you, if you are interested in reading the Bailey Brothers series and you get to this book, you need to read the note to the reader because I just think it's phenomenal and amazing that she continued to write and about a love story. Like, that had to have been hard. Anyway, I was very much looking forward to this couple, Levi and Annika, because there is a town rivalry in Tillicum between the Havens and the Baileys. And a through line of the entire series is that there's like this hidden treasure in town, and maybe discovering where that is would lead to clues about why do the Baileys and the Havens hate each other? Like, what's the story? What originally happened? Levi and Annika's a Haven and Levi's a Bailey, have been secretly friends since high school, when there was like this pen pal situation going on and they figured out their identities, but then secretly, quietly stayed friends because they're like, we actually like each other. We like to talk to each other. So we're just not going to tell our families that we're secretly friends, and we'll continue to keep in touch. They kind of lost touch in college, but once she moved back into town, he started texting her again. And he has her in his phone as Juliet, and she has him as Romeo. And both of them have these feelings, but it's like, how is this going to work? Our families literally hate each other. Things have kind of been escalating between both families in the past couple of books. There's some bad things that are happening that it's like, would the Havens do that? Like, this person almost died. Would they go that far? Take this rivalry, which is supposed to be about like pranks? Would they take it that far? And so there's lots of mistrust. But oh my gosh, I loved their relationship, especially in the beginning of the book. You really felt like these characters knew each other so well, and the way that they had to hide that they even knew each other was so heartbreaking. Annika's a single mom, and there's a scene where her toddler kind of gets away from her in a store, in like a hardware store, and Levi's the one to see him, knows that this is Annika's son, even though they've never interacted before. He's like, I'm not gonna leave this little boy by himself. And so he approaches him and brings him to the front. Annika finds them, and this is where they talk like face to face. And Annika's dad is like not grateful for the situation. He just completely removes himself. And it's just like so weird for them to actually be talking face to face in public. So it's like, oh, the tension's really great between them. Levi's a little bit jealous because she's going on this date with a guy that one of her brothers set her up with. And I will say her brothers. Claire Kingsley does plan on doing a spin-off series for the Havens. The Havens have a lot of work to do, in my opinion, because the only brothers that I would be excited to read about at this moment is Garrett, who is a cop, and Luke, who was Evan's rival in a previous book. The rest of her brothers, I kind of hate them. They are so dumb. Because of course, you know, when the families find out that they have been talking, it's nothing good. Their families act like assholes. So anyway, I did enjoy this book a lot. I didn't really feel the chemistry during the sex scenes with them. Like, the sex scenes felt a little bit weird. And I also felt like the Haven Bailey rivalry / treasure plotline wrapped up in a clunky manner. But again, I mean, Claire Kingsley writing this book after going through one of the most difficult things a person can go through, it's amazing. But I did give this book 4 stars. It wasn't my favorite of the series, but it still was really enjoyable, and I'm glad that we're going to get a spin-off series and still see all these characters in the Havens. Okay, so this is actually also a reread. No Tomorrow by Carrie Cole. This is the Mystic Box Special Edition cover of No Tomorrow. I read No Tomorrow when it first came out. What year was that? Well, let's see. That was 2018 that No Tomorrow actually came out. And guys, this book, even though I own it, I own 2 copies of it now. This book is not one of my favorites by Carrie Cole. And you may be wondering, why, if you didn't like No Tomorrow, would you choose to reread it? And it wasn't that I thought that No Tomorrow was a bad book. I think that it's a very interesting book, very unique situation between these 2 characters. I've never read anything else like this before, personally, but it was just so frustrating to me. But I wanted to see if I, after having removed myself from this book for a couple of years, knowing what was going to happen, would my feelings change if I reread this? And I also wanted to reread it because Carrie Cole was going to write another book that involved the character that we see in No Tomorrow. She did say that it was going to read like a standalone, so you didn't need to reread No Tomorrow, but I don't know. I just wanted to try it out. That book has been delayed, but again, I just wanted to try it out again. So the heroine, Piper, she feels a little bit like a black sheep of her family. She's very quiet and docile. She's a bit of a loner, And every day she works as a secretary at like this fashion, up and coming fashion, athleisure wear, whatever designer brand. And every day for lunch, she goes to the park and she brings her lunch and she eats alone on the bench. Well, one day in the park, there's this musician, this guy heavily tattooed playing his guitar, and she is listening to the music while she's reading her book, really enjoying what he's playing, and she's sneaking glances every once in a while, and he catches her eye as well and smiles at her, pays her a little bit of attention. And she's not one to be very social, so she feels a little bit awkward in the situation, so she just like goes back to her office. But this keeps happening day after day. Going to the park, he's there again. Oh, and he has like a little dog, is always with him. And one day they actually talk to each other, and she ends up by buying him food and food for his dog and water for his dog as well, and they end up by like talking. He's been observing her, and so this is like, she is not used to being the center of attention, especially from a guy who's pretty hot. Definitely not somebody who she would ever imagine herself with, and definitely her parents would not approve, but he seems like he sees her. So they kind of struck up this friendship to the point where Piper is like worried about him because she finds out that he is homeless, and she worries about where he's sleeping at night. She ends up by going alone to go check on him a couple of times. It's late at night and he's under the bridge in the park, and she goes down there alone. And that scene, I remembered it very vividly reading about it, and I don't want to spoil it, but that scene is still a tough pill to swallow for me because it felt just very almost wrong, even though it was consensual. But it still felt icky, especially because she is so naive and so sheltered. It just felt a little weird, okay? But the point about this book is that the character, the hero, he calls himself Blue. His real name is Evan, but no, he's like, nobody calls me Evan, they call me Blue. My friends call me Blue. Evan struggles with mental illness in this book, and it is a struggle until like the very end. And Piper is caught in like the crossfire of that. And what frustrates me about this pairing, this relationship, is that even though I love how Piper doesn't judge him for behaving in an odd manner, she also is missing some really big red flags that everything's not okay, and she just kind of goes with the flow to the point where it feels like she is being strung along, and she is. This book spans 15 years, I think. She really is receiving some hard emotional punches throughout her life when it comes to her relationship with Blue. He's not reliable, he's not stable, and he's definitely not getting the help that he needs. And I just feel like Piper is the one that's always the one to reach out, always the one to be a shoulder to lean on, and the relationship feels very unbalanced, even towards the end. So it was hard for me to actually enjoy them as a couple, but I think that it was a very well written story. It's just very angsty and very hard to see Piper getting almost taken advantage of in the situation. But if anybody could be with a man like Evan, it is Piper. She has a lot of patience for everything that he does. So anyway, I just think that Carrie Cole has some very interesting things to say when it comes to Evan's illness, and I think that it's handled very well, in my opinion. It's just that Piper almost doesn't want to see it. Other people see it. Other people want to warn her, but she just doesn't want to listen because she wants to be in Blue's corner. Anyway, it's to her detriment some of the times, and she goes through a lot of emotional turmoil throughout the book. So again, I still gave this book 3 stars. That was my original rating. I stand by that. For me, it's not an easy read. It's not an easy, enjoyable read to go through this journey with these characters, but it's still not a bad book. So I'm not mad that I reread it. Next, I read Hitting the Wall by Kate C. Wells. Now, I discovered Kate C. Wells with her paranormal shifter romance, The Tyrant Alpha's Rejected Mate. I could never get that title straight, but I hadn't realized that she is the author of Run Posey Run and then also Hitting the Wall. And my friend Nalika was saying on Instagram how Kate C. Wells can take tropes that she really doesn't like and write an interesting story that she actually appreciates, if not loves. So I decided to pick up Hitting the Wall, which is the first book in the Stonecut County romance. It's a small town romance. Wrong side of the tracks. Our heroine Shay, she's living in a trailer park with her grandfather. Her mother's not great, and she had gone to this town to live with her grandfather. But there was this party that happened one night. She's 17, and this neighbor was basically lying, talking her up, saying that she was older than she was and she was her cousin. And so she ends up by hooking up with the town heartthrob who was on a break with his girlfriend at the time. And he's older than her, okay? So the very first scene is Shay knowing that she has fucked up, knowing that she is in a dire situation because the sheriff has come to call. So has her grandfather's boss, Mr. Wall, and Mr. Wall's brother-in-law, Price. And the Walls and the Prices own a lot of the town. And so, like, these are the bigwigs in town, and they're coming because there's this rumor that Kellum, the golden boy, has slept with her, an underage person, and Kellum is a cop as well. He's like a new rookie, and that she's pregnant. And so they're like, we know that Kellum would not sleep with you. And this rumor can totally damage a guy's reputation. Like, his career could be ruined. So, like, you need to tell the truth, because if you're lying, like, you can go to jail. And there are some threats being made that possibly her grandfather could lose his job and lose his trailer as well. So she ends up by lying and saying, like, nope, Kellum did not sleep with me. This is not his baby. And then she goes back to her mom's house, and a few years later, she comes back with a kid. Now, this may be a spoiler for some people, so I will put a little spoiler up, but we do find out very quickly that Kellum had no idea that she was pregnant and that his family basically ran her out of town. So when she shows back up with this kid, he immediately knows, like, that is my kid. She looks exactly like my younger sister, like the spitting image. And holy hell, how could you keep this from me? She obviously doesn't trust him. Why would she trust him? But he is like, I'm not missing out on my kid's life. And he needs to find a way to win back Shay's trust, and so that he can be involved in his daughter's life. Also, their daughter is on the autism spectrum, and Shay is struggling as a mother to get her child the help that she needs, like in school, and she's nonverbal some of the time. So it was just, I thought that this was a very, very, very interesting book. I did give this book 4 stars because the climax at the end, it felt like it wasn't quite finished. But I'm wondering if this character who's bad will show up in the next book, and maybe it's going to be like a through line of the story, and maybe he won't get what's coming to him until the next book or the next or whatever. I'm not sure. I'm not sure if that was just supposed to be the end of that storyline or not. It just felt very, not anticlimactic, but unfinished. Like, I was just kind of like, what is there more? What's happening? Is that it? That's it. So I was a little bit confused about that, but I gave this book 4 stars. I really did enjoy this book a lot. Kellum had lots of groveling to do to make Shay trust him, and I think that he did the work. And that's something that Nalika had pointed out to me, that the heroes can really fuck up in the beginning, but they spend the entire book making it up to the heroine. And finally, the last book on my list is Taste by Melanie Harlow. It's like book 7 in Cloverleaf Farms, but it's like also a next gen as well. And this is a rivalry between Gianni and Ellie. Gianni is the head chef at her parents' like kind of like bed and breakfast type of situation, and she is like a sommelier and she deals with the wine, so they have to like work closely together, but they've been childhood rivals their whole entire life. Well, Ellie has this opportunity to serve wine at this dinner party for this woman who owns this magazine, and maybe she will put Ellie on the map by featuring her in that magazine. But the problem is a snowstorm is rolling around, and Gianni's just like, you cannot drive by yourself in this. Like, I'm gonna drive you. And she's like, I don't trust you. You've been nothing but mean to me. You're such a bully, and you're gonna try to sabotage this or something. He's just like, no, I want you safe. So your parents wouldn't want you to drive alone anyway, and I'll tell them, because their parents are best friends with each other. So Gianni ends up by driving her to this dinner party. The snow is coming down so hard. Gianni is not only like the chef at her parents' place, but he's also been featured on like a cooking show, so he's kind of a household name. People know his name. You can kind of guess when they get to this dinner party, Gianni kind of takes the spotlight because everybody recognizes him and they want to talk to him about his stuff. And this is supposed to be Ellie's opportunity. So she feels like, oh, here he is taking the spotlight again. Like, this is supposed to be my time to shine. Even if he's not trying to, it just happens. And she's very resentful for that situation. Well, it turns into a huge snowstorm where they can't drive back to town. So they have to rent a room at a local motel. Of course, there's only one room, only one bed, and I love those situations. So I did really enjoy this because you can really tell that Gianni attracted to Ellie and he kind of wants to make amends and he doesn't really know how to, but this is kind of like an opportunity for them to let loose and talk to each other again. For the most part, I enjoyed their romance, but it was frustrating at times because both these characters felt kind of very young, and they were young. They're in their early 20s, not knowing exactly, especially Gianni, not knowing what he wants to do with his life, and the communication between the characters was not that great. It's not necessarily miscommunication, it's just the lack of good communication. Just really didn't work for me. Ellie could be quite frustrating in this situation. But it was cute, it was enjoyable. I do think I gave this book 3.5 stars. Oh, I almost forgot this one because I just kind of read it this morning, but I decided to reread The Opposite of You. This was right after I read The Savage last night. I needed like a pick-me-up, and I haven't read this book in a long time, haven't talked about it on my channel, but this one is a kind of enemies to lovers, more rivalry than anything, because our heroine, Vera, she's gone to culinary school and she just got out of a abusive relationship. She's sinking all her money into this food truck, and she's parking it in her brother Van's parking lot. He owns like this bike shop, this custom bike shop. But her new food truck, Foodie, just so happens to be across the street from Lilu, which is a Michelin-starred restaurant. And the hero, Killian Quinn, who is the head chef at Lilu, does not love that a food truck is being parked across the street from him. So he takes this a little bit personally. Vera starts running her business and she starts getting like these messages on Facebook saying like, why would you, there's already a lot of restaurants in that area. You couldn't possibly compete with them. But Vera is trying to respond in a professional manner, says, I'm catering to the late night crowd. This is not the same clientele, so I'm not trying to compete with them. But while she's serving the late night crowd, a couple of the sous chefs and line cooks end up in line for her food, and one of them, Wyatt, actually gets 2 orders and takes them back to Killian. Killian has notes. Killian has sent these little secret shoppers in so that he can taste Vera's food, then write notes about critiques he would make to her recipe. So I really love this rivalry between these two. Vera totally holds her own against this grumpy, bearded, tattooed chef, and you can tell that he's so impressed with her. Even as he's critiquing her, he's so impressed with her ability and also the way that she will not back down, because he has been known to be a tyrant in the kitchen and make people cry, but Vera just completely stands up to him. So I just really love this book. It tugs on my heartstrings, and it was just what I needed after reading The Savage and being severely depressed after that whole thing. Okay, so now I'm finally done talking about the books that I read for the first half of March. I'm pretty sure the second half is going to be a lot more rereads again. There are a few books that I am looking forward to, like Fall Boys by Penelope Douglas, and also Eloisa James's new historical romance, which I honestly know nothing about. I just know that she's writing a new one, and I really like Eloisa James, so it's kind of like an automatic thing for me to just pick up the next book by her. If you like this video, give it a big thumbs up, and if you're not already subscribed to my channel, make sure you subscribe to get notified on any future videos that I do. Thank you so much for watching, and remember, life's better with little HEA. Bye guys!